My guest today is Andrew McAfee. Andrew is an author, an inventor, and an EMF consultant. He had a whole nother life and a whole nother career before that. I'm going to let Andrew talk about that, what caused his departure from his earlier career. And we're going to talk all about EMF tracing today. Andrew, welcome.
Thank you, Keith. It's a pleasure to be here. Thank you for having me.
You bet. So let's go ahead and start with what happened back in 2001, what you were doing for a living then, and what changed things for you.
2001, my wife and I were fresh, new married and having a great time. And we moved into a brand new home we had bought together. And within 6 months, we had both come down with some very interesting symptoms that were chronic fatigue and dark circles under our eyes and the feeling worse between 5 and 7 p.m. And these were not usual at all. In fact, when we're sleeping in bed, our elbows would touch and there would be a spark. And I've had these symptoms of like something was crawling on my face in the middle of the night. Long story short, we called in a specialist, Charles Keene from Florida. He just so happened to be driving from Florida to New York the next day after my wife had called him. And he came up and he found all kinds of wiring problems in our house, code violations. Things are put like 9 volts in our bed and there's high magnetic fields in our living room. And he coached our electrician to fix all of those things. But by that time, we had become electrically sensitive, basically allergic to electricity. And, we couldn't use cell phones because every time we'd even turn on a cell phone, I would get a massive headache and I'd be driving by a cell phone tower and I could feel the energy go by me. So I was putting 2 and 2 together. It's just like our bodies have rejected this. And I was principal horn of the North Carolina Symphony at the time. And, riding on the bus and everything, I could feel everyone else's cell phone and I would get just worse and worse headaches. And I would be wearing shielding stuff over my head. So I started to look more and more weird, like I'm a whack job. And I would wear a cap during rehearsal. So the stigma was growing and growing about, Andrew's, got this problem with electric, cell phones and stuff. So it just started, that's where the rift started.
All right. So the the exposure caused both you and your wife to develop sensitivity. Is that correct?
That is correct.
So are you of the opinion that this propensity to be electrically sensitive is something that we're born with, or some people are more sensitive than others, or that it is a type of poisoning? Since both of you experienced it and had not been electrically sensitive in the past, what are your thoughts about that?
Electricity definitely is a man-made construct and it's not natural and it is a poison. And we all are electrically sensitive to some point. And I believe there's a threshold that is crossed where we become heightened in our perception. The perception level increases when the bacteria or whatever in our body learns that we're too stupid to remove ourselves from this poison or this, and it starts to talk to us and help us.
Oh, that's an interesting way to put it. Yeah. So you were moving into a brand new home, you were newly married, and you had every hope that this was going to be a dream home. It turned out to be anything but. So for people who are listening, they may be a little bit confused. How can a house be built and go through the various inspections that are required in different municipalities and yet be a dangerous place for people?
The fire code, the NEC, the National Electrical Code, is for insurance companies so the house doesn't burn down. It's not a health code. It's not a medical code. So the inspectors that look at wiring problems, for one, aren't looking for electromagnetic fields. They're looking at things that, why would the house burn down? So it's not enough, even if you had a really great inspector. And 2, the depth that they go into at least on our house, of course, did not pick up the code violations that did exist. So you'd be lucky to get a good inspection to begin with.
So this is not to condemn any electricians or any inspectors or whatnot. They all operate within certain workloads, and they've each had their own background and training and whatnot. But it is quite possible to have a home go through the inspection process and yet contain violations to the the code. Correct?
Absolutely. Most of the homes that are built right now are done by non-electricians. They work for an electrician, and the supervising electrician under their umbrella does not have the time to go through and check all the work, and they don't do a final diagnostic in the panels like I've described in EMF Tracing 1 and 2 of my book, how to find if there are inappropriate wiring connections that cause excessive electrical magnetic fields.
And it can be really, really simple, right? It can be as simple as if you have two separate branch circuits that are going through the same box. The normal thing to do when you have wires within a box is you join all the white ones together. But if these are two independent branch circuits, that isn't the right thing to do. And so in an electrical inspection, they're not looking inside of every single box. Would that be fair to say?
That's a great description. Well said. And you're absolutely right. Even me wiring homes, it takes a lot of effort, and you have to put some tape on different circuits to make sure that when you're coming into a box, you separate all the wires out. So if anybody came after you, they would not assume what the box is about. And it just takes a lot of time and a lot of effort to make sure it doesn't happen. And mistakes happen. We're all human, and we all get tired at the end of the day.
Right, right. So if we could urge people to do one thing, it might be to at least have the magnetic fields in a home checked out to make sure there aren't any wiring errors that are very easy to make, which cause a huge increase in magnetic fields. There's much more that can be done, but I wish everybody would do that. What are your thoughts on that?
That, you pretty much right on the head of the nail. If magnetic fields are very easily traced or measured with a fairly inexpensive machine, $100, and that's not expensive. There are cheaper ones out there, but if you just walk through the home with your Gauss meters, what is called for measuring magnetic fields, and you turn lights on and off, you plug something in and unplug it, and you just measure it in the middle of the room. If there's a significant elevation, you have a wiring problem.
Right, right, right. Yep. And there are places in the house that are, I would use the word uninhabitable. I mean, it may be a beautiful home and it may look like something out of Architectural Digest, but there can be places in the home that are uninhabitable. You wouldn't want to spend a great deal of time in them. And that is if everything is in fact wired correctly. So, for example, I had a client, and the only spot left when they had when their child was born was underneath the main electric panel in the house, and that seemed like a logical place to put the bassinet. So, do you want to talk about maybe some places in the home that are by nature not where you want to be spending a lot of time?
Absolutely. That's the number one place, is the main service. The electrical panels, the breaker panels, in my opinion, cannot be in a sleeping. Well, you don't want them anywhere near where you're going to be spending any amount of time, more than an hour a day. I had one client in Charlotte, North Carolina, that the electrical service was at the head of her bed, and it was a beautiful home, and she would not move the bed to the opposite wall, and she wanted that service moved. And $25,000 later.
Well, that's interesting. I have a client right now who is interested in looking at the possibility of moving the panel for similar reasons. And, when you move a panel, you end up extending all of the circuits that were terminating there. So by their nature, when you do those extensions, you're going to have not as bad a magnetic field, but it is going to be higher than in the rest of the house still, would you think?
Yeah, it's just you need to design a house without the breaker panel or the meter or whatever anywhere near your sleeping areas, period. And if you are in a home, you got to get your bed out of there.
Right, right. So let's talk about different kinds of service, the orientation and the configuration of how the electric service is presented. So where I live right now, there are a lot of homes in the country, and it's quite normal to have your own transformer that's providing the service for your home. And then there may be a combination meter breaker and then service to the home. There are also places, typically in more populated areas, where there'll be a three-wire overhead. And there are many places where the service will come in from a transformer that's either dedicated or shared with others. And it comes into the um, disconnect meter on the wall of the home and the breaker panel on the other side. So, can we talk about the relative strengths and merits of sort of those three configurations?
Yes, I believe that it's best configuration to have your main disconnect switch at the meter. So wherever your meter is located, your electric meter, you want the same cabinet, the same box to also have your main shutoff valve, your main disconnect for the whole home. If you get that all in that same cabinet, then that is the place that code says that you have to stick your return current wire, your neutral, into the earth. So that is the one and only place that will get the neutral to earth connection. Then after that, it becomes a 4-wire system. The grounding conductor is then created, the equipment grounding conductor. And then that will go to all your breakers. And then you can have all your equipment grounding conductors on its own bus bar. And you can take an amp clamp and clip over that one wire that comes from the meter to that panel. And you can test all of your grounding equipment immediately. And any changes that are done to the house or any upgrades in equipment, you can test immediately. Is there a new problem? Or if over time something starts to arc or connect or touch, you can immediately diagnose the entire grounding system of the house. Once you have your meter disconnect combo, moving it off the house provides a number of other options. Adding an isolation transformer, your own transformer between the meter and your home, is what I'm going to for a lot of my clients that are severely electrically sensitive and really want to isolate themselves from the problems of the grid.
Let's talk about a service where you have drop messenger. So it's a 3-wire rather than 4-wire coming into, in a lot of cases, right into the home. Can we discuss that for a little bit? What are your thoughts with regard to nuisance current and that kind of an arrangement versus the ideal that we were talking about before?
Well, the problem with the 3-wire overhead service drop is the neutral, the return current wire, is a bare stranded aluminum conductor along with some stainless steel. It's basically the support wire for the other hot conductors, which are insulated. So the neutral gets drilled into the side of the house on a loop. And if you have aluminum siding, you're screwed, because literally the neutral is screwed into the side of the wall, into the metal. And hopefully you have some sort of insulating bushing that keeps all that separate. But the stress on the neutral is big. Branches falling and all that kind of stuff. It's a real problem with having open neutrals, or just a neutral, intermittent neutral, making a bad contact, because the little crimps on the neutral get worn over time because of the stress of this line. And with the modern loads creating lots of harmonics and everything, the neutral is burdened. Sometimes there's more current on the neutral than actually the hot conductor. So the neutral is really underserved and overstressed. The crimps is my real big problem when you have the overhead surface wires. There's oftentimes 4 or even 5 crimps where the wires get pressed together between the masthead, the service point. There's the first crimp, and sometimes there could be 2 crimps up there. And then it goes back to the pole, and there's boom, 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 a number of crimps over there, and where everything is bonded together. So underground services or service laterals, in my opinion, are better from that perspective. But then you have the other problem of actually the wires in the earth being corroded or the other issues. But in general, I prefer underground versus overhead.
Okay. Let's go back to something you said a few minutes ago about the grounding electrode that needs to be inserted. And can we talk about why that exists and what function it provides?
Yes, the grounding electrode is basically a ground rod, a piece of metal that's stuck into the earth. And there are 3 main reasons why the neutral is stuck into the earth. So the reason for the neutral to be grounded is to preserve the power company's transformers. That's the first reason. The neutral, the return current wire being stuck into earth, puts current into the earth. So that means that there is less current on the return wires up on the power pole, and in the transformer, it doesn't heat up as much and isn't stressed as much, and all the connections in the grid is not fatigued as much. It basically, the terminology is the transformers are less fatigued. So using the earth as a return current pathway is the number one reason why it's stuck into the earth. The second one is a voltage stability, which is a very mysterious beast. When things are earth or grounded, mysterious things happened. You then plug in to this massive ocean of conductive pathways. So now you have energized planet Earth with these wires and brought these 2 systems to be one. Where is the reference point now? Where is a 0 for voltage? Voltage is the comparison between 2 points. What 2 points are you going to measure now that you've stuck a wire into the earth and you're energizing your reference point? So I can go on and on. Which direction would you like to go?
Well, what you mentioned was one of the primary reasons we have a grounding electrode at the service is it's for the protection of the infrastructure. And you mentioned there's also a function that so that would be, and you didn't mention, but it's for lightning as well, correct?
Well, I didn't even mention it because it's ridiculous, because it's so obvious. Of course, lightning goes to earth. It's the only thing that goes to earth and stays in the earth.
Right.
So I often just leave it off the topic. But yes, that's the one and only reason why you would ever earth anything, is because you want lightning to dissipate.
Right.
And that's the only reason why I think the grid should be grounded. The rest of the reasons, it should be ungrounded.
So when you have well, I guess first of all, we should say, when electrical service is provided to a home, it is not like the electricity is consumed at the home. The conductors go both ways. So in a very real sense, the electrical forces are being utilized within the home, but there is this notion of return current where it needs to go back to the point of distribution, like your local substation. Is that correct?
Yes, this is a mind-boggling phenomenon. You have current. There's the same amount of current on the hot as there is the return neutral, period. There's no electron loss there.
All right, so we've got a couple of things that I would like to talk about. First, electricity is not all pure and good and righteous as it comes from as we're using it in our homes, and it's fundamentally different than the electricity we find in life. Let's put that aside just for a moment. What we were talking about is return current that goes back to the point of distribution, like a substation. And it is very curious how all of this works. But when you have two conductors, sort of, you could say one outbound and one inbound, and they're close together, then just because they're close together, they have that effect of minimizing the magnetic field. So there are provisions in the National Electric Code that require conductors to be in the same cable, raceway, et cetera. Probably not for reduction of magnetic field, but maybe that's just a happy coincidence there. But I guess what I wanted to mention is we're returning current in North America through the earth. And when you return current through the earth, you're creating a magnetic field because you're separating that from the hot conductor, if you will. So that's something that you and your neighbors and everybody else gets to enjoy, so to speak, is an increased alternating current magnetic field coming from the earth. Can you talk about that for a little bit, please?
Yes. And in my presentations, the power grid problem, I show graphics that try to describe this. Basically, our electrical system, our grid system, does not have any boundaries anymore. And that is the problem. We need to bring it back to contain it. Right now, it has no containment. It is going everywhere. And for the reasons that you just described, whenever charges move, current flows, charges are moving, a magnetic field is created. The best way to cancel that magnetic field is run the exact same amount of current in the opposite direction as close as you can. So two wires, one side by side, one going this way and one coming back. That's how the best way you can cancel fields. Unfortunately, the grid is grounded everywhere. So that means one of the pathways is through the earth. And the earth has infinite pathways. So there's no way to cancel that magnetic field. So yes, we have a magnetic field over the entire surface in the earth as well, but especially around power lines. And we can get into voltage later, but you're exactly right. There is a massive amount of current flowing in the earth. In fact, more is returning through the earth than on the wires back to the substation. And it goes very deep into the earth and takes all paths.
More is returning through the earth than through the conductors. I think that is such an important thing to be aware of because we are polluting our entire environment in that way, really, I think without people being aware. So let's talk about different types of electricity. So I had a previous career in on an ambulance, working on an ambulance. And so when people are in dire straits, oftentimes we would hook them up to a cardiac monitor. And I think everybody has seen in a movie or somewhere, if not, through their work or whatever, this beautiful waveform that's associated with the electrical charges going on in the human heart. And I think similarly, people are familiar with the idea of an EEG, where you get to look at the electrical activities coming from the brain. And I think it's important to talk about how the fact that these electrical impulses are part and parcel of being alive. And this type of electricity is fundamentally different than the type of electricity we have in our homes. Would you agree with that?
Absolutely. We have direct current in our bodies, naturally occurring, And the naturally occurring Earth magnetic fields is all direct current. So people that try to say, well, there's 25,000 Gauss, whatever magnetic fields on Earth, and that's not hurting us. Well, it's DC, and the current inside of a bar is DC, and we have introduced AC, man-made alternating current, into this system.
Yes, yes. So let's talk a little bit about what is part of the creation. What are the electrical fields that are part of the creation? So do we have a natural electric field in the earth if we put aside all the power stations and all Wi-Fi, cell phone, Bluetooth, everything, all the man-made energies? Is there a naturally occurring electric field? Is there a naturally occurring magnetic field? And what are these things like? Yeah, so Arthur Furstenberg, in his book The Invisible Rainbow, characterizes the natural electromagnetic environment that we have as the surface of the earth. And the people in the United States don't seem to be as aware of this as maybe people in other countries, but the surface of the earth is actually negatively charged. And if you go up into the heavens, the ionosphere is positively charged. So there's this huge voltage gradient that we are born into. This is our birthright, I suppose. And it's enormous, like 280,000 volts voltage potential between the ionosphere and the surface of the earth. So we're living in this vertically polarized direct current magnetic field, a very strong direct current magnetic field. So when you introduce an alternating current, the interesting thing about alternating current is one moment it is positive, and the next moment it's negative, and that's switching in North America 60 times per second. So I often think about what is that like for living things who were created to live in this kind of a electromagnetic environment that is static. It varies, particularly with thunderstorms and things like that, but it's always negatively charged on the earth, positively charged in the heavens. And then there's a magnetic field. Everybody knows that when you take a compass and you see that the needle points in a particular direction, and then we add to that a sort of a variable magnetic field, not that it reverses polarity, but that it strengthens and it weakens according to a frequency or a group of frequencies called the Schumann resonance. So all of that is my understanding, and I'd like to get your thoughts on that, Andrew, please. But that's my understanding of what is a part of the creation, what we are accustomed to in our physiology, and that when we accept the conveniences, the amusements, the stimulations that come from our electrical infrastructure and television and radio and all that we might be about in our homes, just having that electric service, if you will, puts you in a very different environment electromagnetically. Feel free to disagree with anything I've said. I just want to hear your thoughts on that.
No, you're absolutely right. And I think the most important distinction that I try to draw for people is we're just interested in what changes in the last 150 years to the norm. So I think it's been somewhat accurately measured with at least the microwave radiation with cell phones and things like that is at least 1 quadrillion times more than our background exposures. Now it gets very complex. Are you saying that it's this certain frequency band of this, cosmic versus X-ray and all this kind of stuff? But let's just keep it simple. The type of energy that we are now creating in the last 150 years is drastically different than whatever it was before then. And to ask human beings to evolve in 150 years to the exposures that we now have is just, it's unreal.
Yeah, well said. And have there been any hints that there's a mismatch, that there's a problem? And how far back do those hints go in your opinion?
Well, Furstenberg's book is the first place that I found that there were actually diagnostics being made of people medically when they were first put out the power lines of these people were having the same amount of symptoms that we have right now, electrical sensitivity. They had a name for it, and pretty much it was taken over by Freudian psychology. They made it, they clicked and dragged it over to you must be a basket case, you're hysterical, and it became a mental thing that we could drug you to suppress all of your complaints. So very quickly it stopped being an environmental disease and became a personal, internal, whatever you want to call it, mental problem.
Yeah, isn't that interesting? I sometimes think, if you're going to have a debate and you get to set the terms of the debate, in other words, you get to control the words that are used during the debate, and we're going to use only these words. Well, you've all but won. So we had the first instance that I'm aware of was called neurasthenia. And then we have let's see, microwave sickness, I think, and maybe radio wave sickness. And then it got all rebranded to no. It's nothing in the environment. It's the individual. The problem, you're too sensitive. You're really sensitive. You're yeah, that's it. You're electro hypersensitive. This is you. It's not us. It's not a problem for humanity. It's just something that some marginal people experience. What do you think about that?
It's very, very well said, and thank you for explaining it so clearly to people that it's so easy to fall into the trap that we are the problem. The people are the problem. And most people just take for granted, even though cell phones have been only been really used for 25 years, actively 24/7 dependency, as it's all of a sudden put into the category of electricity. It's so essential, you cannot be questioned.
Right. Yeah, I think another thing that Furstenberg represents, and I hope I'm speaking accurately on his behalf, but he talks about electrical sensitivity as the condition under which an individual realizes that the health issues that they are experiencing are connected to non-native EMF.
That's a great way to put it. I often believe that the bacteria is really running the show. We're farmers for for mitochondria. We feed them and we get pleasure in return. And cravings and everything are just expressions of bacteria saying, I want this and that. And then, of course, things get more intense with our headaches and other types of symptomology when we're around certain things. And I love to always draw the analogy for people that carbon monoxide, CO, has no sense, flavor, anything. It's imperceptible. But some people will get headaches and other symptoms by being poisoned by it. So if we didn't pay attention to those headaches, we would never have. And fortunately, there are, the gas company puts a little flavoring in with the gas, so we can smell some of it sometimes. But oftentimes we become really dead very, very quickly to, I smelled gas, but I don't smell it anymore, so it must not be a problem because their body's been sensitive. Same thing with electromagnetic frequencies is we have something that's invisible, imperceptible, until a certain point is reached and the body becomes more sensitive to wake us up. Dude, you are getting fried here. You better change your environment.
Yeah, interesting. I love that you chose carbon monoxide as an example. So in my former career, of course, I had to learn carbon monoxide poisoning and how you treat people outside of a hospital environment, and then what definitive care constitutes. And carbon monoxide, I think, is an excellent example because in a room full of people, if you start pumping in carbon monoxide, they are all going to fall at some point, but some will fall sooner than others. And what is really like this electromagnetic poisoning that we're experiencing in the world, certainly in North America, is that you can't do anything for a carbon monoxide victim, in my experience, before you first get them out of exposure to carbon monoxide.
Beautifully said.
And so maybe that'd be a good transition to, how do you get better from electromagnetic poisoning or electrical sensitivity, whatever you'd like to call it? Would you mind talking a little bit about your healing journey? So we last visited your story. You were newly married and you moved into this house and it turned out to be a disaster. It wasn't that you were being poisoned so much by RF. Of course you were, but the real problem there was just the electrical environment that caused a sensitivity. And then can you kind of pick up on how you began to build, I would call it resilience? Would that be the way you might describe it?
That's a good word for that, resilience. So we also found that one of the windows had leaked, and then under the floorboard it started popping up, and they ripped out the floorboard, and mold was under there, of course. So that's in the back of my brain. Okay, maybe we had some mold exposure too. And then some years later, we were both tested positive for Lyme disease. And then for the last 10 years, my wife and I have been constantly been treating Epstein-Barr virus. So in trying to put all this together, you're right on with the first thing that has to be removed is the electromagnetic component. Without that, in my opinion, nothing else will work. Now, of course, play with me here just for a second. So let's say you have a root canal and you have this massive infection in your teeth and it's disturbing your organs and you can't detox right and everything is messed up. Let's say you do an aggressive detox program. You go and you spend $10,000 doing sauna and you do all this great chelation. Well, if you're in a high electromagnetic field, your body shuts down. You can't detox. Your blood-brain barrier is open. So all of this heavy metal, all this other crap, all this detox stuff starts to go into the wrong places. And that's what happened to me. I then got a massive infection, a fungal infection from the overgrowth of all these metals being pushed around in the wrong place. Now I have a fungal infection in addition. So now going to the people that are giving me the IVs and everything else for handling that, overdo it, and then they break another part of my system because this, and then another one breaks another part of my system. So everything was basically just crashing down because I had not been able to, one, really discover all of my electromagnetic frequencies and sources. So my body was so compromised that it really didn't matter what I did because everything was just going down. And until I was truly able to get a very clean sleeping environment, eventually I built a bunker underneath the ground and slept in there for 6 months to finally get my body enough of a rest that I could build up my underlying strength in my system to be able to tolerate all the therapies I was doing. So this is clutch system of I'm low and slow guy. Whatever you do, low amounts and do it slow, because if you get with a specialist, a doctor that specializes in chelation, specializes in parasite cleanse, specializes, they're going to push too fast and things are going to break.
Interesting. Yeah. So getting underground in a bunker, and my own case, I had to get to a pristine environment. Well, actually, as I began removing EMF from my life, I got better in really dramatic ways, but it wasn't until I got to what I would call a pristine environment that the healing was absolutely amazing. So you had that season or that period where you got down to probably virtually pristine, virtually unmeasurable with common instruments levels of exposure to electric, magnetic you probably had some residual magnetic from the phenomenon we just talked about in the ground, but and then the RF as well. Did you have power in there? Any power underground?
I did. At night, I would keep one. Most of it was battery operated. Let's just start with that. With the battery operated system, my heat would only last so long because the type of heat, takes a lot of power. It didn't need any light, of course. And in the summer, it was easy because all you need is a fan, and fans are easy, don't take much energy. So that was fine. But the winter was difficult. It would get 45 degrees in there, and the type of heating that I had at the time would draw too much battery power, and I'd only make about 4 or 5 hours in the night. So most of it was DC. Every once in a while, I would turn on the AC, had one line that came down there, but that would add its own problems. So it was a worst case scenario that I at least had a backup plan.
Yep. And then after you implemented this sanctuary where you could be away from electromagnetic forces to the greatest extent possible, was that a turning point in your healing then?
Right. So at that point, it seemed like my reservoir of energy started to come back up. I had such massive chronic fatigue that I didn't know how deep the Epstein-Barr had taken hold of everything. And ozone was what got rid of the mold out of my brain. Ozone therapy, drinking ozonated water. The Lyme disease sort of naturally went away. I did a lot of Rife machine, a lot of other types of therapy, try to get the Lyme. It would never go away. It was just until my natural immunity came up, then the symptoms just fell away. So for Lyme patients, you got to get rid of the EMFs first. You can't fight Lyme. You can do whatever you want to hit it head and head. You're going to lose. So the Epstein-Barr is still here to this day because I work a lot of really horrible environments with my electrical service. I'm constantly re-stimulating that environment. So it's a constant battle with that.
Yeah, I have to remember, I want to talk to you sometime in this interview about why you've chosen to work so close to the so close to the danger. But staying on the top,
I've got an answer.
go ahead.
I want to become one of the only electricians, certified contractor electricians that's electrically sensitive in the country. And I believe I will be. So there's an electrician from Australia up touring right now in our country who's electrically sensitive. He worked in a power what do you call that? Nuclear power plant, and got fried that way. But the amount of experiences that I have with electrically sensitive and solutions, and then wiring solutions, and then my unique bend with all my devices, I believe my niche will be so unique that it will play a place of respect, if nothing else. I am so tired of fighting with electricians and the powers that be not being an electrician. It always comes back to this pissing match when I'm on a job site trying to help a client. The electrician is always going to win because they are the authority. And I need to be the person that can take care of the client rather than acquiesce to a higher authority on this platform. Well, the code is a very, very strong presence because it is such an authoritative document, and it has parameters that you must follow. And just that in itself, trying to make the argument, well, 250.6 is objectionable current. Okay, we have current on the grounding system. The code addresses that. It gives us a number of options. Even with that, even exploring with an electrician or an inspector, 250.6b says that we can do ... And they'll go, yeah, but you can't do that. Well, it says right here that you can. No, we're not going to do that. It's just taboo. They just have a way of doing things that they cannot conceive of doing it differently than what they usually do. Now, the code does provide, like I said, I'm happy to explore this further with people if they want to get into the weeds and the details. When can you actually cut the grounding conductor? When can you actually interrupt the continuity of the grounding conductor? When can you actually, do things like take a building bond off of the building? Well, 250.6 says you can. And what you need to have is the authority having jurisdiction basically authorizing it. So how do you get the authority having jurisdiction to authorize it? You have to get an engineer to tell the authority having jurisdiction, this will work. And then the authority of jurisdiction will says, well, if the electrical engineer says it's going to work, then we can do it. And then we come back to the electrician that says, no, I'm not going to do that.
Right.
So you get this world of belief, and the clients that are going, I'm tired of wasting money and burning money on all this stuff. Anyway.
Yeah. And all of this comes back around to what kind of people can we help? Working as an EMF consultant, what kind of people can we best help?
In my opinion, those that are already symptomatic are the most ready. And if you've got your spouse also on board, we're good. If your spouse is your greatest enemy, we need to do some Zoom calls, and we need to get some social, we need to have a lot of things worked out before I actually step foot or any biologist shows up on that premises, because having the spouses fighting about, no, you're not going to do that on scene, that's just a horrible situation. It's traumatic. So once you get all of this worked out, okay, yes, we want to go forward. The best situation is someone who's already symptomatic, because they're not questioning you, everything you do. The people that are not symptomatic are the worst people to deal with, because they'll say, well, my husband or my whatever says that this is foo-foo. I don't want to even have this conversation. So if we're already, yes, let's go forward. And then it's about finding the person that's most compatible with whatever you need. There are a lot of people that help you with cell phones. There are a lot of people that help you with basically scanning the house for magnetic fields. You can get any building biologist to do that. They have the meters, walk right into your house, help you out with the first couple of layers of problems. When it gets to my level of specialty, there are only a handful of people in the country that can really do this diagnostic work.
Right. Yeah, and that is the reality. That's the reality that I've found in my work as well, is that the people who are already hurting, they're at a point of pain where they need it fixed, and they've gone through all of the sort of easy things that you can do and the common advice on how to reduce the RF or whatever. They've bought all the little devices. They've tried all the alternative medicine kind of hacks. But if the underlying problem is a type of poisoning and you haven't gotten rid of all of it, I think it's pretty hard to get better. If your problem is an environmental toxin, without getting rid of the environmental toxin, I think you're gonna have a really hard time. So, yeah, we were talking about a number of things there, but I think one implication is I would like to encourage other EMF consultants, whether they are building biologists or wherever they have received their training, or whether they have accomplished it through self-study and mentorship and whatever, to up their game and to think about this next level of nuisance current, continuous conduction of current on the ground wires, and what can be all of the effects there. So before we're done today, I want to talk about your books. I'm very impressed that you've taken all that you learned and you've tried to put that information into a form where people who have the ability, they can take that and they can just follow those protocols, and they can diagnose, well, do I have current flowing, for example, on the ground conductors? and where is it coming from, and you sort of get people there a step at a time. And so I've been reading a couple of your books. The first is let's see if I can hold this up. Killing Current book. And the cover on the next one is not quite as elaborate. It's
Nice and simple.
Pardon me?
Nice and simple.
Well, you know what? You got these out there, and I'm just impressed by that. Yeah, the 102 book. So I just love that you're helping people in that way, people who are serious about creating a quiet home from an electromagnetic perspective. After they've done everything they've found on the internet, and after they've taken the first pass of the sort of things that are easy to do, I think you're really trying to help people to be able to open up the hood, so to speak, productively. And I will emphasize that all of this work should be done with a certified electrician. Is there anything you'd like to say about your books that you have available?
My favorite is the contact current versus body voltage. It's one of my latest. This is my last book that I've written before I did the power grid presentations. And the power grid presentations are the best visual, action visual learning techniques that I have out there. And they are available on my website, homeemftracing.com. The other piece that is usually the greatest mystery of all is voltage. And I don't think voltage should be a criterion anymore for any sort of medical or electrical standard, but measuring current, like you were saying. And that's why I developed the two patented devices, is to stop current. So we have to measure the amount of current flow. And unfortunately, grounding mats and other types of grounded materials are being used in order to solve this problem. But as long as there's current on the grounding system, it can actually make things worse. So that's why I developed those products.
Okay, great. And we'll talk more about the NCB Pro and the NCB and use of that with grounding, which can be a productive therapy, and then use for stopping objectionable current flow as well. So getting back to the issue of finding a qualified electrician, you're right. There are very few people in the world who can work as an electrician and really understand this stuff, which leave people like me, who I'm helping people day to day in my geographic area. I have to work with an electrician, and as you've pointed out, they, in the majority, don't get it. I think maybe at some level, they don't want to think that the substance they've been working with their whole career could possibly be a harm to somebody. I don't know. I can't read minds, but electricians are resistant to the notion that current below a certain level could be a problem, even though the code says no objectionable current. So I want to ask you a question, which is, how do people who understand all of this and are working with people to clean up their homes or create homes that are a shielded sanctuary, if you will, how do you find an electrician that you can provide the direction for the electrician, but you need that pair of capable hands? Do you have any thoughts in that area?
Right. You can use any electrician you want to be your hands if they are willing to work with someone like you. Nobody wants to look stupid. And that's the biggest problem, is the electricians just like I have been in the past, are very defensive. We don't want to expose our ignorance. So if you can talk to them in a way that never questions them or their actions, but just ask them, do you mind helping me with this? Do you mind doing this for me, please? Sure. What do you need? You tell me. What do you want? I'm here. I'm on the hour. I'm on the clock. All right. Will you please? We're going to diagnose this panel. We need to turn the power off. We're going to remove the neutral. And then we're going to remove neutrals one at a time. And with a continuity tester, check continuity. Okay. That sounds fine. No code violations in that. Easy enough. So you start doing it. And as soon as the electrician starts to do things, they physically are involved. They excel. They're very good at making sure things are safe. They're terminated correctly, and nothing goes wrong. So you really do need an electrician. Just never get into the consciousness battle of the why. Why am I doing this? I don't see any reason why I should be doing this. That's the conversation you don't want to have. And at some point, you will have it. Maybe it's the second day into the job, the third day into the job. Why are we doing this? And what I will tell the electrician is, we have a very special client. They have this, physical phenomenon, whatever. And I make it about the client. The client, they're sick, whatever it is. So, and sometimes I have to use the word, are you willing to do this? Are you willing to pull this? Are you willing to? And they go, yeah, why not? Don't question, what I'm willing to do. I'll do anything. But as soon as it gets into an electromagnetic field word problem, you're done. As soon as you start talking about electromagnetic fields, they're going to go, I don't do electromagnetic fields. I've been doing this for 45 years as a master electrician. I never had this problem before. And this is not a problem. None of my clients have ever been injured. Nobody's injured. I don't feel this. That's not a problem. If you ever get to that conversation, you're lost. It's over. So your job as the consultant, or your job as the helper, is to steer him away from the electromagnetic conversation.
Right. Okay. Yeah, that's great. Let's talk for a minute about alternative power and the challenges of alternative energy. So I lived with my family off grid for 10 years. We were a reasonable distance from the grid, and that made it possible for us to have a very reliable power system. In fact, neighbors in the area would call one another when there was a storm, and they would say, is the power out at your place? They just want to get an idea of how widespread the power outage was. And for 10 years, we never had an unplanned power outage. So the answer was always, yeah, our power's working fine. Oh, that's right. You do your own off-grid power. So that was wonderful. Never having a bill from the utility company, that was wonderful. Not having the atrocity of a so-called SMART, which means radiation emitting meter, that was a wonderful thing. But oh my goodness, are there some issues that I discovered when I got sick with regard to, because I became so sensitized to the magnetic fields from the inverter and the dirty electricity from the wiring and whatnot. But what is your experience with alternative power?
Well, just what you just said. There right now is no good solution for the inverter noise. They're trying to get cleaner on it, and there are some very expensive filters to try to clean that up. And then going DC is the other option, which is not 100% sure either. I have a battery bank myself, and I made a bulb that's a 24-volt bulb for my wife to read while we're watching TV, and then she would have next to her while she was playing cards, whatever, a DC bulb, so there wouldn't be any AC stuff. And that worked pretty well. And then one night we went to bed, and I forgot the light was off, but one of the lines was energized from the power bank, and I didn't turn the power bank off. And we both were having, like, our hearts were going crazy, and we had this choking feeling in our throat. Oh my God, I didn't turn off the battery bank. So I go turn off the battery bank, and we both let that, and finally our bodies just totally relaxed. So one wire from a 24-volt DC battery bank into our bedroom area was enough for both of us to feel this anxiety. So shielding around conductors is an absolutely essential part of this. And even with DC systems, they're not miraculous either. So for electrically sensitive people, you have to be just really, really smart about how you expose yourself. Of course, DC is better than AC, but there are no miracles. Let's put it that way. But inverters are a nightmare. So wherever you run your wires, just be very conscious. It's never at the head of your bed or under the floor where you stand. And you just be really smart about, if you can run it in conduit, absolutely do. And you don't get to do anything free. You have to be very conscious about everything you do.
But if we were to advise people or suggest to people who were maybe building an off-grid home, in addition to shielding the conductors that you mentioned, would you say maybe get as much of the infrastructure as far away as possible, like the charge controllers and the inverters and whatnot, perhaps even in a different building?
Yes, distance is all your friend from the sources. So once you get them all separate and you're not in the ambient environment that's from the appliance itself, then you're dealing with the wiring. So I am most familiar with AC wiring and how to bond it all the way back to the source to remove the electric fields. So I've had very good success for that. So if you're going to use AC, I know that, how to use the metal clad cables and get that done. It is very possible to have an electrified home, but when you go off grid, if the metal frame of the trailer is bonded to your appliances, you got a major problem there. And how many ground rods you have, oftentimes mobile homes and other types of whatever you want to call house trailers will have multiple grounding systems. So then you're getting into ground loops. So you can only ground at one place, earth at one place. And then if your appliances are creating a loop with the frame, then you either have to unbond them from the frame or use the NCB to stop the current that'll be circulating. I mean, there are a bunch of different solutions here, but in general, metal clad cable or some sort of insulated cable is a required must. And cutoff switches, 3-pole, 2-pole, or 3-pole cutoff switches to eliminate any energy on that wire entirely from your sleeping areas is a must as well.
Right, right. Let's talk a little bit about sleep sanctuary. I mean, I like the term. There's a certain alliteration in that. And of course, I think everybody resonates with the idea that we need to protect the time, our sort of daily Sabbath, when our bodies are resting and recovering from whatever insults during the day. So we want to protect our sleep. What's your idea of an effective sleep sanctuary? And in particular, do you think it should include RF shielding? And if so, what are the kind of parameters of that in your mind?
Yep. So for modern living, I'm just going to deal with the general populace, which everybody will have RF as a problem. Of course, you've already dealt with your internal sources. So I'm not even going to talk about that. You have no internal sources of Wi-Fi, Bluetooth, whatever it is, security systems, the cameras, whatever it is, putting Wi-Fi. You've already got that done. Now we're only dealing with exterior sources, fabrics and foam, microwave absorbing materials is the way to go. Nothing that needs grounding. If you have metallic canopies or metallic shielding on the walls, it's all going to need to be bonded to your electrical system. And then you have just opened up the big can of worms, and then you have to watch all my presentations, how to use the NCB to handle all of that. But avoid all of that if you possibly can. Using foil is a little iffy. If you do it right in the walls as a part of your breathable barrier, you can get a lot of RF blocking, but that is beyond my pay grade. I'm not a buildings expert. So there's George Swanson and other building biologists that are breathable wall experts that can help you with the vapor barrier that can be also an RF. But this requires that you use MC cable. You have to have no electric field in the walls in order to be able to use a vapor barrier that's conductive. And then, of course, the light has to be pitch black in your sleeping area and no power, absolutely zero electricity in that environment. Now, some people go, what do you mean? So if you can turn off all the power around your sleeping area, do it. If you cannot, and you need to pull in for whatever reason, you need CPAP or you need air or whatever it is, you have to have, everything has to have electric field protection. There are extension cords that have electrical protection, but then you serve an appliance and the appliance is not protected, an electric field or a magnetic field. So if you have to have a heater in a zone, that heater is going to be all the way across the floor. And of course, whatever powers it has to be protected. The electric fields contain, and you can come up with some other screens, literally like mosquito screens, that are whatever you want to, bonded or grounded to your electrical system that can pull an electric field away. But now you're starting to deal with the devil. So if you can possibly have a central air that controls your environment, and you don't need any power on in your room. And I have battery fans that can go like 3 days on one charge. They're DeWalt fans. And in the summertime, we just have the air blowing on us and it feels great. So there's no power on around us. And it's very, very possible to do this with a modern home, unless you live in a condo or something and there's a Wi-Fi router on the other side of your wall, and then you have to go to extreme measures. There's always a solution for extreme measures, but that's not the situation you want to be in. And you always have to have the conversation. This is long-term. Do I need to move?
Right. And that gets to the idea of, are there uninhabitable places? Question mark. And for different people, the answer to that may be different. So for example, for some people, an uninhabitable place may be a place without a shopping mall. It may be a place without access to the arts. It might be a place where the crime rate is low. It might be a place that has good access to their jobs, whatnot. But when you begin to bring in this idea of, we are living in an unnatural electromagnetic environment because of the grid and the electrical infrastructure, but in addition, millimeter wave radiation, RF radiation, and whatnot. So the question is, how much can you achieve in a polluted environment when you realize that your problem is harmful man-made electromagnetic radiation, and you're trying to get away from that? Can you live in downtown New York City and have experience a pristine environment in your sleep sanctuary? What is reasonable? Do you have some thoughts on this?
Well, you're talking about the sliding scale of convenience. The extreme convenience is living in downtown New York because of job, the location of whatever you're going to do, and you want that extreme convenience. So what am I willing to give up with that extreme convenience? Now you move the sliding scale of convenience to the middle. How far are you willing to commute? How much more of an environment? And then you have the worst convenience. You're living out in the country, whatever it is, and your commute, it's horrible. So this is the slope of the evolution of a person's consciousness. When they first become symptomatic, their husband says, there's no way in hell, or their wife says, there's no way in hell we're moving. And then after 2 years of enduring a hell, they go, okay, what can we do to make this better? And we do as much as we possibly can, spend a whole bunch of money. And then after 3 years, more of that, this is not working. We spent all this money on this house and it's not working. Now we have to move. So you spent a certain amount of money to teach yourself of the severity of the problem. This is not going away. So if they would have spent that $50,000 or $100,000 up front, they would have gotten a lot more. But it's always an evolution of a consciousness. Nobody is going to go, oh, electromagnetic field, that's a problem, let's move. No.
Right.
It's the last thing that's going to happen. It's all about what it takes for the person to want to leave the matrix. Nobody wants to leave the matrix. Everybody loves the gadgets. Everybody loves the conveniences that we have. And nobody wants to wake up to realize, oh my God, I live in a poisoned world. And I have to really fundamentally change the way I live and the way I think. Nobody wants to do that.
Yeah, and when I talk to people who have traveled that, because I traveled that that route, and I was brought to my knees, man. I couldn't work for the first time in my entire life. So things get pretty serious at that point in time. And I have interviews with Shannon Rowan, the author of Wi-Fi Refugee. She experienced something similar. And then recently, Julia Lupine, the author of Under a Rock. And so um, I know what that feels like to get to a point where that becomes the priority. And I agree with you. I might be able to see someone that I think, oh man, they would be much better off living in a pristine area. But it's hard to tell people that you might not be able to, you cannot actually achieve a pristine EMF environment when you're living in a big city. And that's a bitter pill for many people. But I think as EMF consultants, we shouldn't be promising people more than we can deliver. And it's all about measurable changes. You know, if whoever that you're working with is not giving you initial measurements, performing a remediation, remeasuring, and getting you to where you'd like to be, I think that's all. It's all about that. And what would be your comments on that?
So there's so much people that can, what you can control in your life is amazing. How you use your cell phone, how you use Wi-Fi, how you jack in with cables with Ethernet versus using Wi-Fi or Bluetooth. There's an amazing amount of exposure that you can you don't have to use all those things. So when you're in your sanctuary, in your house, whatever it is, or in your apartment condo in New York, yeah, you're going to do a massive amount of shielding on your windows, drapes. If you have to put a plate on the wall in order to block somebody else's Wi-Fi router coming through, you're going to do it. You're going to do all these things. If you know you have to live there for 2 years, you're going to buckle down. You're going to get it done. But most people are going to realize for themselves what they can do and what they cannot. And I believe my responsibility is to give people choices and options and not tell them what they have to do. If you choose to stay here, here's what you can do to get the numbers down to a certain point. In my experience, that is not going to be enough. In my experience dealing with electrically sensitive people, you need 0.3 volts or less at night for electric field, 0.2 milligauss or lower. And if your building is constantly 0.5 or above, it's never going to work for you. But if you can get all your Wi-Fi out and your electric field down, and that's the only source for you, maybe you can get to your 2 years out of this. But the cost is going to be, you're going to have blah, blah, blah. It's up to you, whatever you choose to do.
Okay, great. Well, it's been a reasonably long interview here. Let's start heading towards an end to this discussion. But on the way out, I'd really like to talk about something that we kind of alluded to a little bit in our discussion before about moving electrons. So there's a lot of talk about this electromagnetic spectrum where you have non-ionizing radiation and ionizing radiation. And from DC all the way up to ultraviolet A, that's considered to be non-ionizing radiation. And then above that is ionizing radiation. And we're taught, I think that's the right word, taught to fear the ionizing radiation, but not fear the non-ionizing radiation. But you have some interesting observations about something called contact current. So I wonder if you could lead us through contact current and how that might relate to this issue of a more harmful than possibly previously imagined exposure that can be right in our own home and might involve earthing that people are doing for health purposes.
So the definition of ionizing is basically the energy to remove an electron or a charge. So moving charges is current. So what amount of energy would move a charge off an atom is basically current. So if we have current flowing, things are being ionized, in my book, in my opinion. So if you have current flowing through your body, that means that there are electrons or charged whatever moving. And those are very helpful, essential things in the body. And they have a reason why they're on enzymes. They're a reason why there's, things work the way they do in our body. And just like ripping things around in your body isn't a good thing, free radical damage, blah, blah, blah. So contact current is basically 2 points on your body. There's an in, and then the energy is going to leave your body. So if you have 2 contact points, let's say your hand and your foot, and there's a voltage that is pushing here, and there's a different voltage at your foot, there's a differential, there's a different like pressure zone. So things will push or pull between those 2 points. So EPRI found that literally any amount of current that is able to transfer between those 2 points is leukemia and cancer causing. And that's the level of damage of ripping electrons or charges in solution. In liquids, it could be positive charges moving as well. In metals, it's only the electrons that move because the positives are fixed in a lattice. It's leukemia and cancer causing. So we can get into details, and I do that in my contact current versus body voltage book, and showing you that the skin is basically the resistance to current flow. And when the skin gets wet, it goes to 0. And all you're left is the resistance inside the body, which is about 200 or 300 ohms, which is not much. Your skin can have 10 mega ohms. I mean, just a massive amount of blocking. The other thing that breaks the skin is high frequencies. Anything above 1.7 kilohertz is going to break the skin, and then the energy can go internal. So pretty much all current that is existing on grounding systems always has higher frequencies. So if you attach yourself to that in 2 points, you're very likely to have current going through you, which I make the case is ionizing.
Right, right. So you've done something about that. And I think, first of all, I want to make clear, I think you and I would probably agree that the best place to earth would be in a pristine environment. But some people want to have earthing products, earthing sheets, whatnot, and try that at home. I know I tried it at home and it made me sick. So I have a sensitivity, and I can know whether things are good for me or not just by that. But you've invented a device that can block the flow of current from things like earthing sheets, for example. Can you talk about that?
Right. The NCB, this is current blocker. This is the plug version. Basically, you just plug it into an outlet, and then it has those little ground prong here that connects to the grounding system of your home. And then you would plug your either grounding mat or your bed sheet or whatever in here to the grounding prong. And then that provides a pathway for the charges to dissipate or to leave your body. And that presupposes that you have a charge around your bed. So the first problem is your electric field. So how do we get rid of the electric fields? And my opinion is you got to turn off the power. You have to either rewire everything in MC cables to suppress the electric field or turn off the power. You can do that with individual switches on the wall that turns off the power, or go to your breaker panel and turn off the breaker to your sleeping area, not to your whole house. So once you get rid of the electric field, then you don't have the initial problem as much. Sometimes you're still going to have it just because the neutral is always live with other loads. So if you're going to use a grounding mat, you've got to have some protection, because this provides a resistance to the flow of current, which is the killer. Current's the killer. So there's also a dial inside this. If you open it up, and the latest models have a little tap, you can go right in with your screwdriver and adjust the dial. And there's videos on how to find the sweet spot. Is you want to be able to bleed away the electric field, but not have current go through your body. And there's a sweet spot how to do that with the NCB.
All right, fantastic. And I don't know if you have one here. I happen to have one. I purchased this to be used at my home.
Very good.
this is the NCB Pro. This is not to do with grounding for your body. This has to do with if you have nuisance current, say on a well pump or something like that. And can you talk about what this device does a little bit?
Exactly. Any 2 points on the earth is going to have a voltage gradient. So current's going to flow between them because the power grid is energizing the entire earth. So you have one ground rod or two grounds, whatever it is, at a meter. That's fine. There's one. Now, if you have any secondary earth reference point in your home, even if it's an AC unit on a concrete slab, there's 2 to 5 milliamps of current that will come up from the earth through that concrete through the AC. But well pumps are notorious. One time I measured 200 milliamps coming up from a well pump back to the service. So that line is going to have 200 milliamps of current flowing on it that creates a certain field. Now, let's say that line comes right near your bed and you have this magnetic field going right by your head. How are you going to get rid of it? Well, that's why I developed the NCB Pro, is you stick this on the grounding conductor for that well pump. It blocks that continuous 365 current, but if there were a fault, it activates and gets your breaker to trip.
That's fantastic. Just a couple of things. You mentioned the study that came from the EPRI. That's the Electric Power Research Institute, I believe. Is that correct?
Yes.
And again, it was virtually any measurable current flowing through the body. And then we were talking about getting earthing within your house. And you mentioned that the first thing you need to do is get out of electric fields. Is one good way that people can measure that with a body voltage meter or something else?
It's very difficult to get an accurate measurement with a body voltage meter. As the premise is, voltage is not the criterion we need to use for medical safety. But since it's so cheap, the voltage meter works by comparing one point to another. That's all it is. So one point could be 120 volts. Right. And if you put the other point on another 120 volt, then it's the same voltage. So it's zero. It's zero between 120 volts because it's the same voltage between them. And the power grid has destroyed our grounding system by raising its voltage up and the earth around our home. So how are you going to find some healthy? Because the problem is the body has a barrier. The skin contains a different voltage gradient inside the skin. So even if we're burnt on a wire and you go up and you put one hand on a wire and you're ungrounded, yeah, you won't die. You'll just hang on the wire because your whole body is raised to the same voltage and there's no voltage gradient. Put two hands on it, then you're going to die because then it's going to go through your body. Anyway, I don't want to get lost in the weeds here. If you're going to use voltage as the criterion, 2 millivolts is enough of a gradient to cause 2 microamps of current through the body. And that would exceed the EPRI number. So if you're going to use voltage, 2 millivolts is too much. But if you have 0 volts, that's even more dangerous, because that means that you are at the exact same voltage as whatever you're measuring. That means your body has become energized to the point to where you're actually at the same voltage as your grounding system. That's actually quite dangerous. So it's now like, oh my God, 0 is not good. 2 millivolts is not good. 1 millivolt is.
So all of this does point to very, very difficult to achieve no electric field influence on your body, and very difficult to know when you've got there. When would you say the NFA 1000 would be a better way of ascertaining electric fields, or would that still be inadequate in your opinion?
The NFA 1000, in my opinion, is the best electric field way to assess what the environment is for electric fields. And if you don't mind, I'd love to play this little short clip by Mike Holt, if you don't mind.
Yeah, go ahead and expand that. Make it bigger so we can.
And this is from a video called Grounding Safety Fundamentals.
And so that's why grounding does not bring anything to a zero potential.
I'm going to replay that.
And so that's why grounding does not bring anything to a zero potential.
Grounding does not bring anything to a zero potential.
Right.
Grounding does not bring anything to a zero potential. So if you drive a ground rod in the yard, that doesn't mean that you're all of a sudden absolved of all wrongdoing.
Absolutely right. Yep. So voltage is only ever relative to um, your point of reference. And as you've pointed out now in a couple of different ways, we can't really know what that is. And since we're polluting, since we're corrupting the earth itself, and we'll be doing more so with this electric vehicle agenda and other things, it's going to get worse, not better. But
and that's why I want current to be the measure. Do we have current moving through the body? And at Taste Education, don't have 2 points of contact on your body. If you have 1 point of contact, you'll have a voltage on your body. But the most important part is not allow current to get through your body.
fantastic. All right. Is there anything else that you would like to mention that I haven't asked about that you'd like to share before we finish this interview?
I think I got my most important point in, and the presentations, the power grid presentations. Let me just do a quick screenshot to show people how to find those. They're on my website, Home EMF Tracing, and by going there and going to the shop page, you will see the selections on the left side of the page, how to find the power grid problem presentations, power grid presentations. And this is the best things that I've produced. There's part 1, part 2, and part 3. And they're the best ways to actually learn about all of the things we've been talking about today. Almost, no, a lot of the things we've been talking about today. I try to graphically describe the voltage problem, the grid problem, the earth current problem, so people can try to appreciate the gravity of what we're dealing here, and then that'll help them with the extrication of the matrix.
Maybe that'll be our second interview, we could talk about the extrication from the matrix one day.
Sounds good.
Yeah. So I just want to say, you know what? I'm grateful to God that you have decided to share what you've learned from this adversity, from having to change careers and having this affect your health and your wife's health. And when through the help of people like Carl Riley and Charles Keene and other people that you document in your book, and then you began working on your own. And I'm just grateful for you putting all this down in a way that other people can access it. And I just want to encourage people who may be suffering, or the rare people that are out there who want to remain proactive, to really consider nuisance current and contact current, and really driving your environment down to the lowest points possible. And I like what Andrew said about convenience, and that being a real driver to our exposure. So thanks for what you've done in those videos, and in writing these books, and the inventions that you've come up with. And thanks for being on the show. I appreciate it.
Really appreciate your help, Keith, getting the word out. And the message that I want everyone to get is embrace this experience, because in my opinion, it is our salvation, it is our freedom, and is those that are awakening right now are the ones that are helping everyone else become more alive, more healthy, more loving, future generations. And it's the sanest thing that we can do. And it's the most healthiest thing we could do. And we're not the sick ones. We're the ones that are helping everyone become more healthy.
All right. Thanks you very much.
Thank you.